I don't have proof, just these experiences. Whenever an Ask Reddit thread about most paranormal, supernatural, etc., whatever thread pops up, and I have the energy to tell this story, I do. So if you've heard it before, hi. These are all completely real experiences that put me in a position to follow subreddits like these. While I'm definitely closer to open-minded than EVP specialist, I've always had fun with the paranormal mythos. I feel I'm a healthy balance. Is it ghosts? No, those aren't real. But it was strange and uncomfortable, and I'm not going to push it in case it is ghosts. So here is a collection of my experiences that make me superstitious and occasionally keep me up at night. In my early 20s, so close to 10 years now, my aunt on my father's side died quite tragically. An abusive divorce mixed with a pill addiction had her gas herself in the garage with pictures of her children on the dashboard, some individual notes, and her favorite song playing. We were very close. She had struggled to conceive children initially, and when her brother, my father, had managed to have me in an affair, he dumped the shared parenting responsibility on her, and she gleefully took it to raise me with my mother. I offer this background as potential explanation of why. Maybe it was my grief inducing some sort of psychosis. Maybe it was because of our closeness and this was some sort of message. I don't know. For the funeral, I came down from university to stay with my father during the process. Grieve. Help look after my younger siblings. I didn't have a bedroom in his house and slept on the living room couch for the duration of my stay. The layout is important, so bear with me. The garage opened into the living room, which had an open floor plan into the kitchen. The couch acted as a divider between the spaces, with its back to the kitchen signaling the end to the living room and beginning of the kitchen. The kitchen was double height, meaning it had a high ceiling instead of the second floor, and a mezzanine looked down on it from the master bedroom. This is to say that if you exited the master bedroom, you'd be on a landing that could overlook into the kitchen and living room spaces. So I'm on the sofa trying to go to bed, watching Pawn Star reruns and other TV when I get an unsettling feeling that something is behind me. It's very specific, and I experience it when I creep myself out after reading scary stories and have to stop and check my surroundings to ease the paranoia. It was an odd time to experience that feeling as I felt perfectly safe and bored otherwise. So I try and ignore it initially. I remember looking at the dark glass doors that led out into the backyard and psyching myself out that potentially something could be looking in at me and me not be able to see out at it. F it, I have to look. I heave myself up to look over the back of this sofa and into the kitchen to kick the paranoia and settle back in for sleep, but it's standing in the kitchen looking at me. I remember it so vividly. A young boy, maybe 7 or 8, completely nude but with no genitalia. His limbs were slightly elongated, hanging around his knees at his side. The skin was gray, almost bluish in hue, and the underlights of the kitchen counters caught the frantic breathing under his ribs. I can still see it so clearly, how thin his skin looked. No hair on his head, and its facial skin was as if you fisted a handful of flesh on the back of his head and pulled. It made his eyes and nostril slits dark. He had no teeth that I could see or remember, but his mouth was open and dark, and he just stared at me. And then I woke up, obviously in a panic and freaked the F out. I scrambled off the couch to check for it in the kitchen, but of course there was no one there. I ended up turning on all the kitchen lights to act as a nightlight before I eventually calmed down and passed out. The thing is, I never remembered falling asleep. I've had lucid dreams and sleep paralysis occasionally, that horrific feeling when you know it's coming and your mind struggles to make your body move, and you're just locked in that terrible, don't see something weird, wake up body, and eventually jerk yourself out of it. But this type of dream was unique, as I couldn't recall ever sleeping. It was so seamless from fully awake to horrific nightmare, and I kept having these dreams for days. Always the same thing standing in the kitchen, never coming closer or moving outside breathing and staring. Always waking from the experience terrified, but never remembering how I fell asleep into them. I'm unsure if it was 3 or 4 days as it's been so long, but I do remember the morning. My father had taken my younger siblings to get ice cream as a treat to cheer them up. I had been staying awake so late that I would get up late, so this was probably pretty close to lunchtime. My stepmother and I were left alone in the house. She's a Martha Stewart type, like if Oprah had a baby with a Stepford wife and it did Pilates. She's not a New Age hippie or supernatural person. Soccer mom. She was, understandably, concerned for me since every morning they had been coming downstairs to find all the kitchen lights on. Initially, they asked if I was okay, and I just expressed bad dreams, and that was that. But on this morning, I was sitting at the counter eating breakfast while she prepared dinner for later, so we had time to chat. I explained that I had been having these nightmares that I couldn't remember falling asleep, and in them there was something watching me from the kitchen. As I go to explain what this boy looked like, I could see her already very uncomfortable. When books would talk about someone turning pale white from fear, I didn't really get it, but that's essentially what happened to her. She has been chopping stuff for a marinade and stopped chopping, then set the knife down, then looked at me, and I was really afraid. I asked if she was okay, and she goes on to explain that she'd been having terrible dreams as well. She dreamt that something was wrong with my younger siblings, so she'd get up to check on them, and while walking across the mezzanine to their bedrooms, she thought to check on me downstairs, so she'd look over the railing to see someone standing in the kitchen looking up at her. Nope, I'm out. I asked what it looked like, but she expressed that she couldn't remember, only that it was looking at her, and then she'd wake up. Likewise, she'd never remember falling asleep either. 1 minute she'd be reading her book, want to check on the children, then see it, and boom, jolt awake. I laughed sheepishly and asked what we should do about it. While my stepmother isn't a New Age hippie, my grandmother, my aunt's mother, was. She'd brought some sage into the house, and my aunt had killed herself inside to cleanse it. I learned then, as my stepmother was explaining this to me, that the sage was in a box of my aunt's things that had been brought into the house the same number of days our dreams had started. I only needed to ask where it was before we, without any other word, stopped what we were doing to find the box and burn the sage around the house. We giggled at the time, thinking we were being silly. Never had the dreams again. To this day, never had any other experience like it. It was just so bizarre, so random. It doesn't come up much between us, obviously because it was such a sad event, but when it does, we remark on its strangeness before moving on quickly. That experience really shook me. I'd always had fun with ghost stories and internet mythos of the weird and strange, but that one deeply unsettled me. I wouldn't experience unsettlement like that until years later when I took my fiancé to Venice for a summer holiday. We stayed on one of the smaller glass-making islands inside an old factory. I want to say it was a mill that had been converted into flats that then Airbnb had abused for vacationing. The apartment was L-shaped with the entry door being in the crux of the L, the bathroom on one end, and then the living room bedroom on the other side of the L. The first night I just got weird vibes. Unhelpful, I know. But I couldn't shake that same paranoid feeling that something was watching me from the darkness. Hilariously, it was the studio kitchen area. I didn't want to frighten my fiancé, so I kept a reading light on and would stay up and, I guess, guard until I'd pass out. Thankfully, it was fine to sleep through most of the day since it was summer and just abysmally hot. So we would go out in the cooler evenings and rest during the day. I'd managed most of the holiday without having to say anything. Exhausted, but nothing had happened outside my creepy spidey sense, so I figured I was just being a pansy. My fiancée was around the corner in the bathroom, preparing to go out and doing her makeup. I was laying on the bed, reading my phone. I hear her call my name, but it was a tone that was questioning. Not like asking me a question or trying to locate me, like as if she was saying, "Is that you?" I don't have time to respond as she calls my name again. This time it's not questioning, it's afraid. She's saying it like, "Help me!" I call out to her, but she's shrieked and I hear her scramble, and then the entry door open and shut. She'd run outside. I ran out after her and found her in the hallway panicked. She asked me if I was in the kitchen, and I explained no, I was on the bed. She said she saw something weird, and I said, "I know, I felt it too." What did I mean? I meant that I've felt something weird in the kitchen since we've been here. She is kind of flapping about in the hallway now. She expresses that she doesn't believe in that stuff and I'm scaring her. I press her for what she saw, and she explained it was low to the ground and fast. She thought it was me coming around the corner, but then saw it move again and just went into fight or flight and flew. And speaking of, we were now locked out. We had a nice laugh about it, waiting for the Airbnb host to get over to us with a spare key. When asked about what happened, I jokingly said it was a ghost. The host laughed and said, "Yeah, it's why I rent this place and not the one I live in now." These two instances led me to this sub, where I hope to see or hear a similar experience. Maybe have some fun bookmarks for a rainy day read. But lately, the sub has waffled between some great hoaxes, Samsung camera anyone, to some individuals needing psychiatric assistance and support. I can't offer proof, which sucks that appears to be the nature of these experiences. But they affected me to shift my perspective into this window of something is happening in a dimension or reality or timeline that we cannot access, and occasionally a ducking, alien squid or something pops into our spectrum and just causes chaos. Or maybe it's easier to just recognize that the brain is such a great pattern-finding tool to create coincidence when there is none. I don't have the answers, just these experiences. I know this may violate Rule 3, and for that I apologize, but I've always found these to be the most credible form of evidence, these shared experiences across groups.